I've got something that may make the hair on your arm stand up. The book that was in his book holder when he passed away was Your Hidden Power by Thomas Troward. And the title or the chapter that was opened on his desk was Touching Lightly. And that's what he was studying right to the end of his life. While you were speaking that, I pulled this out. And I took a picture of the book holder
I have to
with
show you something, Brian.
with what he had.
Now your hair is on your skin. Well, look what I have here on my book holder.
Well, isn't that something?
Isn't
Well,
that
there you
something?
go.
Hello and welcome to the Human Instrument Mastery podcast. I am Shimrit Nativ, and today we have here a very special guest that I am so very honored and grateful and excited to have here and to have this conversation with, and that is Brian Proctor. Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for joining me. Bob Proctor's son and an incredible teacher and coach and person in his own right, of course. And if you've read my book or if you've listened to me for longer than 30 minutes, you probably heard me mention Bob because Bob is really one of the people and teachers and mentors that have influenced me the most. And I'm so very grateful for his legacy and for his gifts and for his presence in the world. And so I couldn't be more excited to have Brian here today and have this conversation about life, about the work that we do, about this journey, and of course, about Bob as well. His legacy reached so many people also thanks to really good marketing and publishing and production. And it was always so well done and so easy to connect to and to communicate and to receive. And I learned also a lot actually from Bob, even on that level in terms of how to present the information and how to, make everything look right and feel right. And I know, Brian, that you had a lot to do with that as well at the time. And then today, you are a co-founder together with your wife, who also had an amazing role in that legacy. And today you are working together in an organization you both created together with Kelly Proctor, your wife. And you're on a mission to empower people to live their best life and leaning into simple but profound strategies. And I am so eager to have this conversation with you about that exactly. Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for being here again.
Well, it is great to be here, and thank you for all of that. It's been a wonderful experience continuing on sharing what my father taught for virtually all of his life. So it's good to be here with you, Shimrit.
Thank you so much. And I enjoyed so much reading your book that you shared. It's here in my library. And it was so touching to read some of the memories and some of the sharings from your perspective from different years, different ages, different layers of this journey of life. So thank you so much for sharing that with the world. And I recently published a book as well, as you know. That's what made me reach out to you because I was thinking about who would it be really meaningful for me to have a conversation about the skill of freedom, which is how I titled the book, but also kind of a term that I came to when I talk about what Bob always called so simple but so misunderstood, right? It's one of the things Bob always said. It's so simple but so misunderstood. And so I call it the skill of freedom because it's a skill, right? It's whatever it is, freedom for us in whatever way it can be expressed in life as financial freedom, freedom to work from anywhere you want, or whatever it is, time freedom. It's all, of course, an expression of an internal state of being. And it's a skill to develop and sustain in that state of being. And that's what we are so, well, that's what we so love, right? I know that I do, and I know Bob did, and I am sure that you do too, to practice this skill and to help others as well develop it. So how do you relate to that idea of this being a skill?
Well, I kind of look at it like this. It's kind of interesting. I love the title of your book. And, freedom is something I think a lot of people are looking for. We live in a world now that really enables us to be free, to be able to do things that we want to do, to work from wherever we want to work. When I think about it, the first thing that comes to mind, Shimrit, is when I was a young boy, I can remember driving around in the car with my father. And he studied Earl Nightingale way back in the early 1960s. And I can remember holding a portable record player in my hand, sitting in the passenger seat, listening to a record called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And Earl was one of my father's first mentors. And the strangest secret is simply this: we become what we think about. It's something we've heard over the ages, and there is so much truth in that. And freedom is a state of being. We can become that by thinking that. And if we feel free, if we embrace freedom, if that's what we give energy to, we can create more of it in our life. And it's really part of what I would consider the strangest secret. So I love the title that you picked, and I love the everything that goes along with it.
Thank you so much. And that's the thing, because it's like freedom is our natural state of being, in fact, right? It's our innate birthright, you could say. But then so many people, as you said, want it and experienced a lack of it, or perceive their life as being lacking freedom, or they're experiencing lack of that. And they might say, well, it's a nice idea that you can, if you feel free and if you think about freedom, then you can create more freedom. But how can I actually feel free if I am not free? If I don't have enough money to this, if I don't have the ability to do whatever I want, and so on and so forth. I have to work at this job that I don't like. So people don't feel free, and that's why they want it. And that's such a tricky part, right? I find that in this work, also with myself, in this practice of the skill, it comes down to being able to think, to feel, to be in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. As Neville, you mentioned Earl, whom I've heard so much about from Bob, and Neville Goddard. I've learned about him from Bob. I learned how to study from Bob. This is one of the greatest gifts that I feel personally that I received from him, is how to read. I always loved reading, but really how to read with repetition. I have my book holder here and all of that, and a few specific teachers. Neville is definitely, for me, at the top of that list. Just like for Bob, it would be Think and Grow Rich as his Bible, going everywhere with it. For me, it's The Power of Awareness. It goes everywhere with me. I know it by heart. And so the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the tricky part that I'm touching on, that I would love to hear from you, how you handle it and how you help others, guide others to do that, because we want what we don't have, right? So we were talking about freedom, and you said so many people want freedom. And I suggested, yeah, and they might say, how can I feel free if I don't have freedom? So they want freedom because they experience the lack of it. And the trick is to feel free. And it's a skill. I mean, there's nothing and no one outside of us that can force us to think or feel in a certain way. That is actually our innate freedom. That's why it's our natural state. But then to want something we don't have and then feel like we're having it already, it all comes down to that, right?
It really does. And I think, that book, The Power of Awareness by Neville, it's a spectacular book. I mean, I've studied it probably just like you have. My father studied that one in a very deep way.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, literally days before he passed away, he was still studying. He never thought he knew it all.
No.
And he hit a point where he couldn't even hold the book or read. And he asked me to read to him. And I would read from that book to him. That's what he wanted to study. It was really powerful. And here's the important piece to, I think, all of this is most people are allowing their current circumstances, their current environment to dictate their thinking. They're looking at what's happening, what's going on, and that dictates their thinking. And that's the problem. We'll never create freedom for ourselves if we are focused on what our current environment, what our current results, what our current circumstances are. That whole book and what my father taught was that we have to change our thinking here first. If we want to change our outside world, we have to stop focusing on our outside world. I'm not saying ignore it. We have to deal with what's going on currently, but we need to create a vision in our mind of how we'd like to live. That, as you say, the freedom that we want to experience. And as we can create that in our mind and start living from that place, start envisioning what it's like to be free, the kind of business you want to have, the traveling you'd like to do, the family that you'd love to have, the love you want to share, all of these things starts here first. And if we give proper energy to what we want, we will then create the world that we're looking for. It doesn't go the other way around. And most people, unfortunately, are letting their current world dictate how they're thinking. So they're going to create more of the same. So if you want to change it, you need to change the way you're thinking and what you're looking at. And as you do that, your outside world will change.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the skill. That is the skill, because we are programmed to look at the outside world and let that information dictate us. Bob always used to draw, of course, the stick person, and then he would write OW next to it, outside world, right?
Yeah.
And we are programmed, that subconscious program, the paradigm, as Bob called it, is wired to give that information to the outside world for our survival, because we need to survive this outside world. So, of course, if a predator is about to attack me, I have to give it my attention in order to survive that encounter. But we live like that, even though there are no predators, and it's just the number we see in our bank account or what the doctor said, or I don't know, mostly just the patterns of thought that we have, even regardless of external conditions sometimes.
Correct.
Yeah. And you talked about how it starts in our own mind. Another writer, the second one that most influenced me that I've learned of from Bob is Thomas Troward. And Bob always used to, in his inner circle that I had the opportunity to be part of for a while, he would teach these two resources, these two teachers, and specifically the two books, The Power of Awareness and The Hidden Power, really hand in hand. Sometimes he would take one chapter from this one, a specific one, and a specific one from the other, and would teach them in tandem for several weeks over and over again, which is one of the things I learned, as I said, from Bob, is to read the same chapter, sometimes even the same just paragraph, and read it over and over and over again. And Thomas is a bit more complex to, Troward that is a bit more complex to digest and comprehend. Of course, he says the same thing. And he talks about how I don't have, it will take, this is not the time for me to open books and start looking for the specific lines. I do that with my students all the time. Hang on. And I open a book and I look for it, and they all sit patiently because it's so worth it to read the thoughts that these great minds had. But if I paraphrase on what I have in mind from Troward, how it emanates, the energy is first emanates from our mind. He gives this, he conveys this idea that the energy is pure life energy, pure life essence is how he called it, and how it starts in our mind and is for us to choose for our own individuality how to mold it and how to direct it. It's such a powerful idea. It's such a powerful truth. And it's exactly what you're saying.
Well, you'd almost think that you set this up, but I've got something that may make the hair on your arm stand up. One, Thomas Troward was certainly something that my father, Bob Proctor, studied. He studied it in depth. And as you know, he had a book holder on his desk all the time.
Yeah.
And it was always, he would hold the book open. It had arms that would hold the book open. And he would study those 2 pages, sometimes for well over a month, until he really understood the concepts of it. Well, the book that was in his book holder when he passed away was Your Hidden Power by Thomas Troward. And the title or the chapter that was opened on his desk was Touching Lightly. And that's what he was studying right to the end of his life. The book that was in his book holder when he passed away, Touching Lightly, was the whole concept of it is simply this. And so many times we try to force the chapter that was try to make on his desk was touching lightly. My father always taught that's what he was studying. You try to force to the end of his life, you're pushing it away. And this whole theory of touching lightly is just really start to entertain the ideas, the things that you'd like to have in your life. Don't force these things. See it as your right and see it as happening easily for you. And what I always look at it in some of the things that I wrote, especially in My Father Knew the Secret, the first book that I put out, was simply this: if we take care of the little things and we do something small each day towards our goal, towards our dream, towards that life of freedom that we'd like to have, rather than get worried about all the big stuff that have to get done, because that will create overwhelm, what can I do today that's going to get me one step closer? And then tomorrow I wake up, what can I do today to make me get one step closer? And just do the little things. Those little things compound over time. You know, in a year's time, if you did that every day, that's 365 little things. I promise you that's going to add up to a very big change in your life. That will put you into that place of freedom. That will change your environment. It'll change your circumstances. It'll change the results you're getting by taking care of the little stuff.
Yeah.
And he got all of that out of these books that you're talking about. And it's funny. While you were speaking that, I pulled this out. And I took a picture of the book holder
I have to
with
show you something, Brian. I mean,
with what he had.
now your hair is on your skin. Well, look what I have here on my book holder.
Well, isn't that something?
Isn't
Well,
that
there you
something?
go. That's
And
interesting.
this is something that I wrote during a
Ah,
call with Bob. He
uh-huh.
said, just write a little note on your desk and write the word let.
Yeah,
It's here since on my book holder. And
that's
an
awesome.
owl, because I always have owls, you can probably tell.
Well, that's impressive. Well, there you go. That's exactly what he had opened up on his book holder when he passed away.
This is one of my absolute favorite chapters. What is our point of support? Is it in ourselves or outside of us?
Right.
It's according to the actual belief in which our answer to these questions is embodied, so will our lives be. And when I read this first, I highlighted the word actual belief and embodied. And Bob always talked about you can believe something intellectually, you can have that idea, you can accept the idea. And that's a very important first step. That's what we do with our conscious mind. We can accept and reject ideas and originate ideas, as Bob always told us. But then to actually believe, meaning act on our belief, embodied with our body, bring it to the physical plane of our existence, that's what really changes our reality. Which leads me to another thing that I wanted to mention here. You mentioned every day a little bit, right? So that's how we develop skills. I was a musician for 20 years before I turned into this line of work of coaching. And I was a music teacher. So I would help people develop their skill in playing the flute specifically. And I would always tell them, just practice 5 minutes a day. If you don't have any more time or urge than that, just do 5 minutes. It's better that you do 5 minutes every day than 2 hours once a week.
Right.
Right?
Very
And
true.
that's it. And so that's how we develop skills, and that's how we develop the skill of freedom. It's that repetition, obviously, that repetition. And I want to tell you something that I share a lot, but this is the first real conversation that we're having. So I really want to share that with you. As I shared with you before, my native language is Hebrew. And in Hebrew, different words come from roots, from 2 or 3 letter roots, right? And sometimes it's seemingly unrelated words that come from the same root. And the word skill come from the same 3-letter root as the word faith, and also other words like trust and art and mastery and belief and devotion and practice. And Bob always used to say faith based on understanding is the key to freedom. Faith based on it's one of the things that I quote the most. Faith based on understanding is the key to freedom, right? So we're talking about freedom, and that's the key. And that faith is a skill. That's the skill of freedom. And I think it's beautiful how in that and most importantly to mention, that 3-letter root is the word amen. Amen in Hebrew. Isn't that powerful?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
It is. It's all in there. It's all in that truth. So in what way do you love the most helping people develop this, what I call skill? But really, as you share also, when I was reading, more about what you do, help people. And as I said before, just living their best life, leaning into simple but profound strategies to do that. How do you love doing that the most? What do you find is most?
Well, it's an interesting question. I certainly never expected I'd be the one on podcasts or speaking from stage or creating coaching programs. That was always my father's thing. But since his passing, it has become one of my passions to continue to share his message. It's been really important to me. And I think what brings me joy the most is watching people bet on themselves. That's it. Watching people bet on themselves to step out and go after what they want. Too many people limit themselves and just, like we said earlier, allow their current circumstance to dictate the way they live, the way they show up. And boy, that's such a shame. So for me, I love watching people step out and do something different, do what makes them come alive. And watching that happen with people has just been incredible. I've seen people become authors, create new businesses, do all kinds of things, move from one country to another because that was a big dream that they were afraid to do. Just watching people bet on themselves and step out and do what they really want to do. It's been an absolute pleasure. And, I think the most important thing that any of us can do is to live our life. We're living this human experience and we're all different. And boy, what a shame to try to be like somebody else. Why not let your inner heart shine to the world? Be authentically you and live the life you really want to live. Don't live somebody else's life. Don't be a bit part in somebody else's movie. You be the star in your movie. Do what you want to do. Find a way to make it work. And I've seen people that have to keep a regular job for a while because they've got to pay the bills. You have to be responsible, but start to live their dream doing something else. And eventually that can replace the income of the job that you need to have. And I've seen people do that now. And it brings me joy. It brings me joy to watch people come alive and
Mm.
start to live a life for them. That's what brings me joy.
I resonate with that so much. And Bob always said, if I want to be free, I got to be me, which is
Yes.
basically what you're saying. And so
Yeah.
it links to this idea of freedom as well. You have to be yourself. You have to be yourself first, always. There's even a chapter in Thomas Troward's book called Yourself exactly about that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned income and money, which is another thing that Bob loved talking about and did that so well. And again, here I've received from him such great life changing ideas and also directions to resources like Robert Russell, You Too Can Be Prosperous, and others. Of course, The Science of Getting Rich. How do you help people, or how do you for yourself see money as a spiritual idea and as something that is infinite?
I look at money simply as this. It's a reward for service rendered. Most people are trying to get money, but are they providing a service that's valuable? If we can provide a service that helps, that's valuable, you will receive all the money that you want in this world. You really will. It's a different way of looking at it, but money is just a reward for service. So anybody that's watching this or listening to this, my first question would be, what are you doing to provide a service to anybody outside of yourself? When we can work on providing the best service possible to create change, we will get rewarded. That's when the money starts to flow easily. So it's rather than focusing on the money, start focusing on the service that you're providing. You do that, the money will take care of itself.
That's so true. And then with that comes also your concept of yourself. Also, back to Neville, that talks a lot about that, because there are people that are giving service yet don't see themselves as a wealthy person, as a prosperous person. And so they do give service. They are in a place of giving, and still their concept of themselves, their self-image, their identity is holding them back from allowing that reward to come into their experience,
Well,
right?
you said the key words, their self-image.
Yes.
That's where people need to work on their self-image. They need to be worthy of what they want to receive.
Yeah.
You can provide the service, but if you don't feel worthy, you're not going to charge enough for it, or you'll give it away for free. You'll do whatever you can to provide the service, but you're not bringing that wealth to you. So that's a self-image thing. And we need to know that we are worthy. Like I fully believe I am worthy of all the good that's flowing my way. And that's it. We tend to overcomplicate these things. But if we feel worthy, we allow ourselves to feel worthy. And for anybody that's struggling with that, sometimes a simple affirmation that I am worthy of the good that I desire, and repeat that often enough. Speak it into a mirror, look yourself in the eyes, and feel it when you say it. Don't just say it to say it. Feel it. You'll change the way you see yourself. That's where it all starts.
Absolutely. And I always say, we are born feeling worthy. When I talk about this, I many times say, when we are born, right before all this environmental programming is really kicking in, we demand the good that we desire. We cry out loud. We wake up everyone around us so we are fed or held or taken care of. And then, of course, we learn that certain behaviors produce certain outcomes, and we learn how to survive in this environment. And our sense of worthiness changes as part of that process.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the way I would look at any of that. We have been programmed. We've been programmed by our parents. We've been programmed by our environment, all kinds of different things. And some of the programming is great and some is terrible. It just is what it is. But here's the
Yeah.
deal. We can't change the time we got out of bed this morning. That's something my father always said from stage, and I loved it when he said that. We cannot change what's happened in our past. It just is what it is. The key is to start to focus, okay, how do I want my life from this point forward? And give that energy. Quit looking back, because looking back on the past will only create regret, will create all kinds of different things. Focus on what can you do in the present moment? How would you like to show up in the present moment? What kind of ideas would you like to hold in your mind in the present moment? And when we live in the present, we don't give energy to the past and what's happened, and we don't give energy to the future and overwhelm of what all we've got to do. But what can I do in the right here, right now? How can I show up as the best version of me right now? And if we keep living that, we keep bringing our awareness back to the present moment, being that best version of us right now, boy, that's when life changes. That's when things really start to get good. So that's where we've got to put our energy.
Absolutely. And when he used to talk about that, he would hold the hourglass many times that you have
Yes.
here. And I also have one over there, since I think the book there is hiding it a little bit, but it's right there, similar to the one you have. And he would always hold it and point at that very moment where the sand is flowing. That's this present moment. And that's the only way, that's where our freedom lies.
It
That's
really
where it
is.
is. And that's the only reality there is, really. Yeah. And when we were talking about the self concept and the worthiness, came to my mind a conversation I once heard Bob had with someone. I don't remember which program it was, but someone
Mhm.
came up to ask a question. And she was exactly in that place that I mentioned, where she was giving so much. She was living out of a trailer, I think, or something like that, and was giving, and considering even giving more. And Bob stopped her there and actually said she had, like, he showed her how she has to feel worthy to receive and act on it. And this reminds me of how generous Bob was, because on these calls, when people raise their hand and ask a question so many times, just like with this, I think with her, he gave her like a tuition, or I don't remember, a year or something in the program or something like that. He would do things like that so often, whether it was gifts that are equivalent to money, like tuition to be in his programs, whether it was just his phone number, well, not live like that, but he would say, email my assistant, she will give me my number, and I want for the next 30 days that you text me, or things like that. He was just so generous, so generous. And he really embodied and demonstrated the power of increase, that very important lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, here's the deal. He was a giver for sure. He was a very generous man. I got to see it firsthand all of my life.
Yeah.
Here's the important part. At the end of his life, it was easy for him to give because he was earning a lot of money and he gave away millions of dollars. But here's the important part. He gave when he didn't have it. When I was a young boy and he was struggling, he was out trying to make it happen. I mean, can you imagine trying to make this business work without the internet or anything of that nature that we have today that makes everything easy? It was a tough business, the personal development industry back in the 1960s and 1970s. And he still gave then, even when he didn't have it. He always knew that you need to keep things flowing. You need to give. You need to do good with what you can, and that will come back to you. And he always said it might not come back to you from the place you gave, but that energy, it has to come back to you. That's just the law. And he was like that even when he really didn't have the money to do it. He was still generous. He would still give of his time. He would give of whatever dollars he did have. And he knew that it would always come back to him. That was just a way of being. And it was a gift that I got to witness that. And I get to live my life the same way. And when we do that, good flows back to you. It has to when it's given freely.
Yeah. it really gives me chills to hear that and to hear your little stories. Just a little mention here and that you say that you share, and it's so true. And I remember that he said, "You cannot give what you don't have."
Right.
So when you give the impression of increase through these acts of generosity, then you benefit the increase
Yes.
because you receive that impression as well. It has to go to and through you. And so your well being increases, your abundance increases in one way or another by sharing. And that's such a powerful. And it's the same thing when I think about it with if we were talking about worthiness with love. Like so many people can find it easier to love another, like their
Mhm.
children, and not love themselves. But actually, when you love another, love is flowing to and through you. And then it's
Right.
just a matter of perception, of using your perception to to become aware of it,
Yeah.
that you are loving, you are love when you love another. Yeah, just some thoughts about that.
Well, and I love what you talked about the impression of increase. Do you have some time I could share a story?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'd love to share a story with you because this is one of the very first things that I learned from my father. I was 9 years old when I learned this, and it's all based on the impression of increase. So I was born in Toronto. A lot of people don't know my father is Canadian, lived in Toronto virtually all his life. So I was born in Toronto. I started school in Toronto. Within a year of starting school, we moved to London, England. So I started a new school in London, England. Less than a year, we moved back to a different area of Toronto. So I was then in a different school again. It wasn't a year and a half down the road, we moved to Chicago. That's when my father started working with Earl Nightingale. So I'm going into the fourth grade and I'm going into my fourth new school. I was that perpetual new kid in school and I hated it.
Mm.
It was just really uncomfortable. I can remember sitting, I was 9 years old. I remember sitting on the ottoman in front of my father in the den at this house in Chicago. And I said to him, I said, Dad, I don't want to go to school. I'm terrified. I hate being that new kid at school. He said to me this. He says, Brian, what you need to do is put these four letters across the forehead of everybody that's in front of you. MMFI. And that stands for make me feel important. He said, if you can make everybody in front of you feel important, feel seen, feel heard, he says, you're going to make friends in a hurry and you're going to get along great in this world. Well, that's what I started to do. And it was incredible how quickly I made friends. Well, when I was 26 years old, I got into real estate, selling real estate in Toronto. And I went to a seminar in Palm Springs, California. There was about 2,000 real estate agents in the room. I was sitting right at the front row. Mike Ferry was the speaker that was doing this event. And Mike had heard what I was doing in real estate. At 26, I was selling more houses than most people that have been in the business for years. And Mike asked me up on the stage and he said, what are you doing that's different? And I shared that story about the MMFI, make me feel important. I said, I made every client, every prospect in front of me feel like they were the most important person in the world. When you do that, you're going to get along great with everybody. People will want to deal with you. They'll want to do business with you. We don't give that enough thought. What are you doing to make everybody in front of you feel seen, feel heard? When we do that, we will attract all kinds of business into our life. Well, that's what I shared from the stage, that story. And I treated every client as if they were my only client. I treated them as if they were the most important person in the world. And because of that, I got all kinds of referrals. I sold all kinds of homes. And I have lived my life from that place ever since I was 9 years old, from a simple lesson that he taught me.
Mm.
And what this is leaving the impression of increase. What can you do to leave everybody that comes within your presence today feeling a little bit better because they were in your presence? Think about that. Boy, if we can start living from that place, we will have all kinds of good flowing our way. What can you do to make everybody that comes into your world today feel a little bit better because they were in your world? If we can start living that way, forget all the nonsense that you see online, all the social media stuff. There's enough garbage going on. Don't give that energy. Give energy to what can you do that's good right now with everybody that's in your world. And we start living that way, boy, a lot of good's going to start to happen.
Amen. So good. So, so good to hear those words and feel the intention and of course the story behind what you were sharing. And it sounds like, I mean, I know that, and from your story, the context of it, it's clear that you have accomplished great things of all kinds in all kinds of ways and walks of life. And I'm saying that because as an introduction to my next question, which is around goals. So Bob, of course, always talked about goals and how goals are for us to grow, not for us to get, which is another quote that I have here in the book. I love that because this again is one of those it's parallel to the tricky part that we were talking about before, where you want what you don't have but you want to be in the feeling of having it. I find working with so many people and helping them create goals and grow into the person that is living those goals, that it's again one of the greatest challenges is to set goals but not be in the getting mode, but in the growing mode. And to be in the present moment, as we said before, but still so attuned and fused with a future. Can you talk with us a little bit about, with me and with those who will be listening, about this a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Goals were a very important part of what he taught. He said we've always got to be striving for something big, something greater than us. And when we go after big goals, yes, when you achieve the goal, that's a reward. But what you learn along the way, that's the important thing. And God, there's so many ways I could go on this one. I've got this on my desk. I'll show you. So
Please.
I learned about goals when I was 15 years old. That's what really got me started. And a goal, like you said, is not to get, although that's where it starts. It's what you want in your life, but it's about what you learn along the way. So when I was 15, I was given a gift by my father on my 15th birthday. And it was this little box, and I opened it up, and in the box was this little dinky car.
This was the gift, what you're holding
This
right.
was the gift, this little
Oh,
car, this little dinky car. And underneath it was a note. And I'm looking at it, and at 15, I'm thinking, why is he getting me a dinky car? This is, a little kid's toy. But underneath it was a note. And the note said this. He said, for every dollar you save over the next year, I'll match it so that you can buy your own car. Well, as a kid, 15-year-old boy, I mean, you talk about freedom, the skill of freedom. As a young boy, having your own car, man, that's freedom. Here's the interesting thing. I started to do things I would not have normally done because at that time, for me, that was a worthy goal. I started going out in the wintertime in Toronto. It's freezing cold. You get lots of snow. I went knocking on doors. I would shovel people's driveways for $5. In the summertime, I was cutting grass for $5. I went and got my first job at an ice cream parlor making, I think it was $1.15 an hour. I mean, I did whatever I could to put money together because I was motivated by this goal. Now, when I turned 16, yes, I was able to buy myself a car, and that was a great reward. But what I learned along the way was the important thing. That was the value. That was everything. I learned how to work hard, how to do what was required. I learned that I had to give up maybe going to the movies with some of my friends because I was saving for this car, this goal of mine. Now, that's a simple concept, but all of us have big things that we'd like. And the key is to pick something that will cause you to get out of bed and do something in a day that you wouldn't have normally done. That's when you've got a worthy goal.
yeah.
We held a retreat a couple of months ago, and one of the fellows that was holding this retreat with me, he did something that was magical. And this can help maybe a lot of people watching this or listening to this right now. We sat at dinner the first night. We had 10, I think 10 clients there. And he went around the table and he handed this money clip with $5 million in it. Now, of course, it's not real money, but it was symbolic for $5 million. And he asked everybody, he said, all of your needs are taken care of. If you have a mortgage, your mortgage is paid. If you have bills, the bills are paid. All of your needs are taken care of. And you are given this $5 million and you have to spend it tonight. What would you spend it on? What would you do with this $5 million? That will start to open you up to a bigger goal, a worthy something. What would you do with it? What would you
Mm.
do with it? Now, here's the great thing. We're all different. We all have different wants. We all have different desires. What would that be for you? What would that be for you? And start to think of that. Okay, what would I have to do to achieve that? and then start getting down to the nitty gritty. What can I do today? What one little thing can I do today that's going to get me just one step closer to that? It might take me 5 years to get there, but boy, oh boy, if I start doing something every day, I will get there. I will get there. And what you learn along the way, that's the key. That's the magic. And that's when things really start to happen for us. That's when we create change in our life, when we start chasing after something that is a desire for us. And it might not be a desire for, let's say, if I'm going after something for my wife or my kids or anybody else, doesn't matter. If it motivates me to do something different in a day, that's a worthy goal. That's a worthy goal. And as you chase after that worthy goal and you start doing what's required and you let those tasks, those daily little bits compound, before long, you'll be there. But that's the reward. But what you learn along the way, boy, you can never take that back. You can never have that taken away from you. You learn to be a bigger person. You learn to create more in your world. You learn to create more service. You create more of doing good. When you do that, you'll reap the rewards. And so that was really what it was all about. Maybe I ran on a little long about
Oh,
that,
it's
but
perfect.
goals are very important. Goals will cause us to do things that we wouldn't normally do. And when you have that kind of a goal, that's when you will create change in your life.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, there's so much more that I want to talk and ask, but I also want to keep it in a time frame that will be most beneficial for those that are listening. So I want to wrap it up for today and ask you, where can people learn about what you do if they want to, go online and look at what you do with your wife? Of course, we will include that link in the show notes for anyone watching. We have, of course, your website that we will share. Is there anything in specific that you want to leave people with? Either it's an idea or it's an invitation. Is
Yeah,
there
I
anything
would
like
just say, yeah, you can go to brianproctor.com. You'll
yes?
see the books that I have there. We've got some free gifts that you can pick up there. So that's all there.
Uh,
I think at the least, even go to Amazon and just search Brian Proctor. You'll find my books there. I've got a new book that's being released next month that's coming out. So
Really?
yeah, I've got some great stuff out there that you can get for very little money that really I have put my heart and soul in these things that are the essence of what I've been taught over my lifetime by Bob Proctor as a father. My father and I had a very special relationship, and I had the gift of working with him for almost 30 years. So, we were inseparable for a very long time. And I share all the best things that I learned having Bob Proctor as a father, because that he is going to only teach me the best. I've often said that, you know, Dad was given the book Think and Grow Rich in October of 1961. I was born in December of 1961. So while my father was changing his paradigms, he was learning new things, he was programming that into me right from birth. So
Wow.
I get to share all of the great things that I learned having Bob Proctor as a father. And that is my gift to the world. That is what I am trying to be of service for. And
Thank
I'm having fun doing it.
Thank you so much for that gift. And it's so precious. And I can't wait to read your new book. And maybe we can have another conversation once it's out there so we can talk about it. So, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for all you do and for who you are. And everybody listening, please go to brianproctor.com to get more of this beautiful opportunity to learn from Brian and to connect with his work and with his presence in the world. Brian, I'm so grateful to have had you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shimrit. I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
Likewise.